Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Aron Nimzowitsch, my system. The customary code. Weak points or holes in the opponent's position must be occupied by pieces, not pawns. From one of the most influential chess theoreticians of the late 19th and early 20th century, Tarash. A brief review of the last part, where we continued our study of Chapter 2, The Doubled Pawn and Restraint, Part 2 of the book, Position Play, and completed discussing the last topic of the chapter, a review of restraining methods, with illustrations from Nimzowitsch, and then went through game number 33 of the illustrative game section as advised by Nimzowitsch. So now, moving further into the book, we will go through game number 34 of the illustrative game section, which was played between Aron Nimzowitsch versus Stefano Roselli del Turco in the Baden-Baden tournament of 1925, Baden-Baden, Germany. Stefano Roselli del Turco was an Italian chess player, 5 times Italian champion, writer and publisher, who played around the turn of the 20th century. Nimzowitsch writes of the game as following: illustrates the restraint of our double complex in an extraordinarily striking manner. Nimzowitsch with the white pieces and Roselli with the black. Notes by Aron Nimzowitsch. Knight f3, d5, b3, c5, e3, knight c6, bishop b2, bishop g4, h3, bishop takes on f3, queen takes on f3, e5, bishop d5, queen d6, and e4. We have here to do with a remarkable situation which we have already had occasion to notice in the chapter under consideration, namely the one in which we do not at once cause the double pawns by bishop takes on c6 check and b takes on c6, but rather bring this about by a roundabout way. As a matter of fact, after bishop takes on c6 check and b takes on c6, we should never be able to force our obstinate opponent to accommodate us by playing d4. For example, bishop takes on c6 check, question mark, b takes on c6, e4, knight f6, and so on. So e4, d4, and knight a3, threatening knight c4, queen c7, bishop takes on c6 check, b takes on c6, and the weakness of the double pawns is evident. f6, knight c4, queen d7, and queen h5 check. The maneuver of the queen is intended to help prevent black's castling on the queen side, not on the king side as one might at first sight think. g6, queen f3, and queen c7. Not castling long because of knight a5. And the covering move, knight e7, is ruled out because of queen takes on f6. So queen c7 and queen g4. Now she rejoices in the observation post she has won for herself. This queen maneuver has quite a hypermodern air to it. King f7. White threatened queen e6 check and king d8. Or queen e6 check, bishop e7, and knight a5. So queen e6 check, king d8, and bishop takes on c6, and the unpleasant double pawn is a fact. As such, king f7, f4, h5, queen f3, he takes on f4, and bishop takes on c6. At the right moment, for the queen dare not retake. For instance, queen takes on c6, queen takes on f4, rook e8, castling, double exclamation mark. Queen takes on e4. If rook takes on e4, then knight e5 check. So queen takes on e4, queen c7 check, double exclamation mark, and wins. Queen e7, knight d6 check, followed by knight takes on e8. As such, b takes on c6 was played by black. At last, white has achieved his end. At the cost, it is true, of a pawn, but here this plays but a subordinate role. Castling and g5. Because see the previous note, black's position can be broken up. Obviously, white must not allow black to safeguard his position by knight e7 to g6 to e5. To break up black's game, 3 pawn moves are necessary. Number 1, c3, number 2, e5, and number 3, h4. If white contended with only 2 of these, his work were but half done. In the game, all 3 are brought about. c3 and rook d8. Now this rook is happily tethered to his pawn at d4. Rook e1, knight e7, e5, knight f5. C takes on d4 and knight takes on d4. If c takes on d4, then e takes on f6. King takes on f6, queen e4, and knight g3 is impracticable on account of a bishop takes on d4 check. So knight takes on d4, queen e4, and bishop e7. The reply to f5 would have been queen b1, an attacking move in the best modern spirit. For example, f5, queen b1, king e6 to protect the f pawn, queen d3, and knight d6 to follow with a decisive attack. So bishop e7 and h4. Now the undermined black position tumbles like a house of cards. Queen d7, e takes on f6, bishop takes on f6, and h takes on g5, where black resigned the game. For after bishop g7, knight e5 check, bishop takes on e5, and queen takes on e5. Black's king is a pathetic figure in his helplessness. Next is game number 35 of the illustrative game section, which was played between Paul Joner versus Aron Nimzowitsch in the Dresden tournament of 1926, Dresden, Germany. Paul F. Joner was a Swiss chess master who played around the turn of the 20th century. A noted musician, violinist, he also won the Swiss Chess Championship 6 times. Nimzowitsch writes of the game as following: illustrates a position under complete restraint and may serve as a pendant to my game number 8 of the illustrative game section against Samish. Please note that we will go through this game, Samish versus Nimzowitsch, towards the end of the video series, along with any other remaining games from the illustrative game section of the book. Paul Joner with the white pieces and Nimzowitsch with the black. Notes by Aron Nimzowitsch. b4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, e3, and castling. Black intends to bring into existence the double complex only under conditions favorable to himself, reference to the previous game. Bishop d3, c5, knight f3, knight c6, castling, bishop takes on c3, b takes on c3, and d6. The prognosis for the complex pawn at c4, c3, and so on is in a measure but not pronouncedly in favor of black. Yet after e4, e5, d5, and knight a5, black would not have bought the barricade which he has achieved altogether cheaply, for his c-pawn would then have been much better placed if it was still at c7, as discussed previously in the chapter under consideration. So d6, and play continued with knight d2. A fine idea. In reply to e5, d5, and knight a5, the intention is by knight b3 to bring the aggressive black knight at a5 to reason. So knight d2, b6, and knight d3, question mark. There was time enough for this. f4 should first have been played. If then e5, there would follow f takes on e5, d takes on e5, d5, knight a5, knight b3, knight b7, e4, knight e8, and the weak point c4, which is now attackable also from d6, will be protected by queen e2, while white for his part can use the f-file together with a4, a5 as a base of operations. The game would then stand about even. So knight b3, e5, and f4. For the reply to d5 would now be e4. Thus, d5, e4, bishop e2, and knight e5. Or d takes on c6 instead of bishop e2, and e takes on d3 with advantage to black. So f4 and e4. Queen e7 was also possible, for if, say, f takes on e5, d takes on e5, d5, then knight d8, e4, knight e8, and black by knight d6 and f6 gets a strong defensive position. Reference to the note to move 10. So e4, bishop e2, and queen d7. Black sees in white's kingside pawns f, g, and h pawns a qualitative majority. The text move queen d7 involves a complicated system of restraint. A simple one could have been brought about by knight e8. For example, knight e8, g4, or f5 and queen g5. So g4, f5, d takes on a c5. Observe the dead bishop at c1 and consider further how ineffectively posted the white pieces are for an attack to be launched in the g file. D takes on c5, queen d5 check. Queen takes on d5, c takes on d5, knight e7, rook d1, knight d6, and black has rather the better game. So queen d7, h3, knight e7, and queen e1. If bishop d2, black would still get the advantage. For instance, bishop d2 to threaten bishop e1 to h4, knight f5, and queen e1. Best, black threatened knight g3 and to exchange the bishop when c4 would become very weak. g6, and if now g4, knight g7, queen h4, then knight e8, and the pawn movement is strangled at birth. For now would follow at the next move, the powerful f5. So we always get the same picture. The awkwardness of white's pieces as a result of the double pawns renders more difficult by far the carrying out of any action on the king side, however planned. So queen e1, h5, and bishop d2. Queen h4 will not do because of knight f5. Queen g5, knight h7. Queen takes on h5 and knight g3. So bishop d2 and knight and queen f5. The queen is bound for h7, where she will be excellently placed, for then the crippling of white's king side by h4 will at once be threatened. It must be considered that the restraint maneuver queen d7 to f5 to h7 represents a remarkable conception. King h2, queen h7, a4, and knight f5, threatening knight g4 check. H takes on g4, h takes on g4 check, king g1, g3, and so on. g3 and a5. In this position, the backwardness of the b pawn is easy to put up with. Rook g1, knight h6, bishop f1, bishop d7, bishop c1 and rook c8. Black wishes to force d5 in order to operate undisturbed on the king's side. d5. Otherwise, bishop e6 would follow and d5 would be forced after all. King h8, knight d2 and rook g8. And now comes the attack. So, was queen d7 to f5 to h7 actually an attacking maneuver? Yes and no. No, since its whole idea was to restrain white's kingside pawns. Yes, since every restraining action is a logical prelude to an attack, and since every immobile complex tends to be a weakness and therefore must sooner or later become an object of attack. Bishop g2, g5, knight f1, rook g7, rook a2, knight f5 and bishop h1. White has very skillfully brought up all his defensive moves, all his defensive forces. Rook g8, queen d1 and g takes on f4. Opens the g file for himself, but the e file for his opponent. This move therefore demanded deep deliberation or careful consideration. E takes on f4, bishop c8, queen b3, bishop a6 and rook e2. Seizes his chance. Black's e-pawn now needs to be defended. If he had limited himself to purely defensive measures, as say bishop d2, a very pretty combination would have resulted, namely bishop d2, rook g6, bishop e1, knight g4 check, h takes on g4, h takes on g4 check, king g2, bishop takes on c4, queen takes on c4, and now follows the quiet move e3, and queen h3 mate can only be parried by knight takes on e3, which move however would cost white his queen. As such, rook e2, knight h4 and rook e3. Here I naturally expected knight d2 for black's obligation to defend the important e-pawn furnished white's only counter chance, as has already been observed. But as a result of that move would have been a delightful queen sacrifice, namely knight d2, bishop c8, knight takes on e4, queen f5, knight f2, queen takes on h3 check, knight takes on h3 and knight g4 mate. The point moreover lies in the fact bishop c8 and queen f5 cannot be transposed. For example, knight d2, queen f5 question mark instead of bishop c8, queen d1, bishop c8, queen f1 and everything is protected. Whereas if bishop c8 and queen d1, the move bishop takes on h3 wipes out the cornerstone of white's building. King takes on h3, queen f5 check, and so on. But rook e3 was played by white in the game, and play continued with bishop c8, queen c2, bishop takes on h3, and bishop takes on e4. King takes on h3, queen f5 check, and king h2 would have led to a mate in 3. So bishop takes on e4 and bishop f5 best. For h4 by black can no longer be withstood by white. After the fall of white's h-pawn, the defense is hopeless. Bishop takes on f5, knight takes on f5, rook e2, h4, rook g2, h takes on g3 check, king g1, queen h3, knight e3, knight h4, king f1, and rook e8. A precise finish. For now, there is threatened knight takes on g2, rook takes on g2, queen h1 check, king e2, queen takes on g2, and against this threat, white is defenseless. If king e1, then knight f3 check. King f1 or d1, queen h1 check would lead to mate. Hence, white resigns. One of the best blockading games that I have ever played. Alright, we conclude this part of Aron Nimzowicz's My System here. We shall continue onwards from the next part and begin the next chapter. The isolated queen's pawn and their descendants, which is chapter 3 of the second part of the book, Position Play. Here is a look at the recent channel support from my Twitch stream. Several new supporters: monsopiad, Qhinn, Eddie Murphy, Professor Blundermaster, wildgo, JanFortyTwo. Professor Blundermaster is a fellow chess streamer. I will post a link to his stream in the video description. Do check him out. Thank you for the kind support, everyone. Much appreciated. Alright, till next time, take care.